All right, so we're diving deep today into something pretty wild, actually. The U.S. deported a bunch of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. I mean, specifically to this mega prison there called CECOT. And well, this all went down on Sunday, just this past Sunday, March 16th, 2025. And what makes this whole thing really stand out, I mean, like really unprecedented, is how they did it, what legal tool they used, and the fact that it happened while a judge was like, wait, hold on, stop.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. That's the real shocker here.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a law that's been used so rarely in U.S. history.
Yeah.
Just 3 times. And for good reason. It's a wartime declaration.
Mm-hmm.
So to see it applied now, when the U.S. isn't technically at war with Venezuela, and with the court actively trying to block these deportations, well, yeah, it's a pretty explosive situation.
Definitely explosive. Okay, so for those of you who might not know CECOT, it's intense. Basically a massive prison in El Salvador. I mean, massive. With incredibly strict conditions, no visits from family, no recreation, no education or work programs. I mean, anything. It's designed to hold a ton of people. Up to 40,000 inmates. And the reports we're getting suggest that the cells are severely overcrowded. Like, we could be talking 65 to 70 people crammed into spaces meant for way fewer.
You know, it's really striking to see these extraordinary legal measures being used to send these individuals to such an incredibly restrictive environment. We also have this figure that the U.S. is paying El Salvador $6 million for a year of what they're calling services related to this. It just raises so many questions right off the bat. Legal questions, ethical questions about why this is happening and what it means for these people.
Absolutely. So let's break down who exactly was deported. We're looking at roughly 250 people who the U.S. government has labeled as suspected gang members. More specifically, it seems to be about 238 members of Venezuela's Tren de Aragua gang, and then another 23 who they're linking to MS-13.
And the footage that the El Salvadoran government released when these folks arrived, it's, well, it was chilling. They showed them coming in on a plane, then being moved to CECOT under super tight security. I mean, shackled heads down. It's a huge convoy of buses. Then once they got to the prison, they shaved everyone's heads, put them in these stark white uniforms, you know, knee-length shorts, T-shirts, socks, rubber clogs. The whole visual was very stark controlled.
Yeah, it definitely sends a message. So the justification that the U.S. government is giving for all of this comes down to this Alien Enemies Act. President Trump has said that Tren de Aragua was invading the U.S. and that this is why he's using this wartime law. But, I mean, that brings up some big problems legally, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge problems. The Alien Enemies Act at its core requires either a formal declaration of war or what they call an invasion or predatory incursion. And then that triggers these special powers that the president has over foreign nationals who they deem a threat.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, it's been used very sparingly.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the Adams administration, the biggest example we have is Japanese internment during World War II. And we all know how that's viewed now, a very dark chapter, legally and ethically.
Right. And so now the U.S. hasn't declared war on Venezuela. And even though people use the word invasion when talking about immigration, the power to actually declare war belongs to Congress, not the president. So the big question everyone's asking is, did the president overstep his authority here by using this act when there's no declared war and no legally recognized invasion in this case? I mean, is this even an invasion?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's exactly why Judge Boasberg issued that temporary restraining order to try and stop the deportations. The idea was to give the court time to really dig into whether the Alien Enemies Act is even applicable here, legally. And crucially, the judge also told any planes that were already in the air to turn around, come back to the U.S.
But then you have the White House response to this court order, which was, well, pretty strong and kind of strange, too. The press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, put out this statement saying that the court order had no lawful basis, and even more than that, she claimed it was issued after everyone had already left U.S. soil.
The timeline is what really gets you thinking here. The White House is saying they finished the deportations before the judge's order took effect, but they don't give any specifics to back that up. No times, no details. And Leavitt's language talking about an aircraft carrier full of foreign alien terrorists, well, that's definitely strong rhetoric, but it doesn't actually address the legal issues at play. And just to be clear, in our system, it's the courts who decide if a court order is lawful, not the White House.
And so after that, the ACLU and the Democracy Forward Foundation, they jumped right in, demanding clarification from the court. Basically, what they want is the nitty-gritty details. When exactly did the judge issue the order verbally? And then in writing, what times did those flights leave and get to El Salvador? When were these people actually handed over to El Salvador? I mean, they're worried that the court order was just ignored.
And then we have Attorney General Pam Bondi, who confirmed that, some gang members were deported in between these two orders that Judge Boasberg issued on Saturday, But she said the original 5 people who filed the lawsuit weren't part of that group. So that suggests that maybe some folks were deported after the judge said stop. Maybe not all of them, but some. Which means they might have found a loophole to get around the judge's order. Not the letter of the law, but definitely the spirit of it.
And this all brings us to the big elephant in the room, CECOT itself. And what this means for these people in terms of human rights. I mean, we talked about the conditions there. And it's not good.
Yeah, the information we're seeing paints a really grim picture. No family visits at all, no time outdoors, no chance to work or learn any skills, no education. It's just total isolation and confinement. They have these motivational talks sometimes.
And supervised exercise, but that seems to be about it. The goal seems to be just keeping them locked up, not rehabilitating them, or even letting them have basic social contact.
And we have to remember just how many people are in El Salvador's prisons now. The numbers have more than doubled in just a few years. It was something like 36,000 back in April 2021. And now by March 2024, it's a whopping 110,000.
And that huge increase is mostly because of President Bukele's crackdown on gangs, which is really popular in El Salvador. People want to see less crime. But human rights groups like Cristosal, they're really concerned. They've documented a lot of accusations of abuse, torture, not enough medical care, and they've reported at least 261 deaths in custody during this crackdown. So this brings up a major point about international law. Countries aren't supposed to deport people to places where they could be persecuted or treated inhumanely. And when you look at the conditions inside CECOT and all these reports of human rights abuses in El Salvador's prisons in general, it makes you wonder, is sending these people there even legal? I mean, are we breaking international law here?
It's a huge question. And you have to look at this within the context of how the Trump administration handles immigration and presidential power in general. They're known for acting fast, asserting broad executive authority, and then dealing with legal challenges later.
We also heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who said publicly that, they deported over 250 people. He called them alien enemy members of Tren de Aragua and said they were going to very good jails in El Salvador. He also mentioned that $6 million payment. So, I mean, that's a completely different picture than what human rights groups are saying about CECOT.
Yeah, it shows you how divided people are on this. The administration is saying it's about protecting national security, but other folks are worried about legal processes being ignored and human rights violations. We also heard from Democratic Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas, who said that we need to stick to established legal procedures instead of just making broad claims and using these obscure wartime laws.
And we can't ignore the political side of things.
Yeah.
President Trump has always said he's tough on crime and immigration. And this definitely looks like he's following through on that. Could be good for his image.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about why they did this now and why they did it this way. Appearing strong and decisive, especially on these issues that really resonates with a certain part of the population.
And on top of all this, there's the case of Mahmoud Khalil, who's a green card holder. He was detained because of alleged anti-Israel views. Not directly related, but it raises similar questions about how much power the president has over non-citizens based on what they believe or if they're seen as a threat to foreign policy. And for legal permanent residents, people who have built lives here, it brings up some big First Amendment concerns.
It makes you think about who they might consider a national security threat and whether the executive branch thinks they can just act on their own when dealing with non-citizens based on their beliefs or who they associate with. Even Republican Senator Mike Rounds said he expects the executive branch to follow the law. So this isn't just a partisan issue. It's about basic principles of the rule of law.
All right, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've been looking at this controversial deportation of alleged gang members to El Salvador, and they used the super rare wartime act to do it, which has kicked off a legal battle and some serious accusations that a court order was ignored. And then there's the whole human rights situation with CECOT where they're being sent. I mean, it's a mess.
And zooming out, the big question is, does the executive branch really have this much power? I mean, are they overreaching? This goes way beyond this one case. It could have lasting effects on how our government works and what rights non-citizens have.
Exactly. When you think about the history of the Alien Enemies Act, all the conflicting stories about what happened when, and the completely different descriptions of what life is like in CECOT, I mean, it makes you wonder, what does this mean for due process and the rights of non-citizens going forward? And even more than that, what does this say about how the executive and judicial branches are working together or not working together? It's definitely a lot to think about as this all develops.
It is, and it'll be important to keep an eye on these legal challenges and any new information that comes out about how these deportations happened and how these people are being treated in El Salvador.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be keeping a close watch on it all.
I think we all should. This has the potential to be a real turning point.
I agree. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all of this. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time, folks, stay informed and stay engaged.